Coming up on Arirang News, South Korean President Moon Jae-in is in Washington for his summit on Friday with President Biden. They'll be talking vaccine cooperation and regional issues, including North Korea and China. A day ahead of the summit, South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics attends a meeting with the U.S. Secretary of Commerce to talk about reshaping the global supply chain. Samsung is one of several Korean companies set to announce big U.S. investments. And South Korea gives emergency approval to the coronavirus vaccine from Moderna, giving it 4 vaccines now in its arsenal. But with case numbers still high, the distancing rules have been extended for another 3 weeks. It's 5:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The highlight of President Moon Jae-in's U.S. trip is now less than a day away, his summit with President Joe Biden. High on the agenda are COVID-19 vaccines and North Korea. There's been talk of a vaccine swap, for one thing, and the summit could reveal much about the Biden administration's new policies on the North and China. Kim Min-ji gives us a rundown of President Moon's schedule on Friday.
President Moon Jae-in will sit down for talks with U.S. President Joe Biden at the White House on Friday afternoon, which will be early Saturday morning Korea time. High on the agenda is COVID-19 cooperation, with eyes on whether the allies foster a vaccine partnership through a swap arrangement or a transfer of technology. Also on the table, bolstering economic cooperation, with South Korea's conglomerates expected to unveil massive investment plans in the U.S. Last but not least, coordination on North Korea to revive the stalled peace process on the Korean peninsula. A senior Blue House official says the leaders' joint statement will likely include that they respect the 2018 Panmunjom Declaration, which committed to the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, improving inter-Korean relations, and formally ending the 1950-53 Korean War. The official added that Moon and Biden are also expected to discuss abolishing guidelines on South Korea's missile use, paving the way for missile sovereignty. Seoul is banned from firing ballistic missiles with a range of over 800 kilometers under the agreement, first signed in 1979. It has been revised twice under the Moon administration. Attention is also on whether the U.S. will seek South Korea's cooperation to counter China's rising influence, or call for improved ties with Japan to bolster trilateral cooperation. Afterwards, the leaders will hold a joint press conference.
We expect that North Korea will be a central topic of the discussion, of course, tomorrow, but they also will discuss climate. They will also discuss economic partnership. They will also discuss China, and those will all be a part of this bilateral conversation and meeting tomorrow.
Prior to the summit, Moon will hold talks with Vice President Kamala Harris. He will also attend a White House ceremony where Biden will award the first Medal of Honor of his presidency to a U.S. veteran of the Korean War. It will be given to Colonel Ralph Puckett Jr., who in a battle in late 1950 deliberately drew enemy fire by running across an open area 3 times so his unit could locate and destroy enemy positions. On Friday evening, Moon will attend a groundbreaking ceremony for the construction of the Wall of Remembrance at the Korean War Veterans Memorial in Washington. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
A day ahead of the summit, President Moon had a number of high-profile engagements. On Thursday, he went to Capitol Hill, where he met with the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. He also paid tribute to the fallen American service members buried at Arlington National Cemetery and stopped by the memorial to FDR. Hong Yoo has the highlights.
Calling the South Korea-U.S. alliance the world's most exemplary one, President Moon Jae-in highlighted the importance of cooperation between Seoul and Washington to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. He made the comments during a meeting with U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other congressional leaders on Thursday.
오늘 의원님들과의 만남으로부터 시작될 한미 간의 대화가 한반도 평화는 물론 코로나 극복과 경제 회복, 기후변화 대응에 이르기까지 양국 협력을 더욱 깊게 하고 전 세계의 연대를 이끄는 계기가 되길 기대합니다.
Pelosi thanked President Moon for his leadership and efforts toward denuclearization on the Korean peninsula.
We look forward to hearing what you have to say about security in terms of the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. And thank you for your extraordinary leadership in that regard.
Earlier in the day, President Moon visited the Arlington National Cemetery, the final resting place for more than 400,000 U.S. veterans, including those who died in the Korean War. He paid his respects to those who sacrificed their lives for peace and freedom in a foreign land. President Moon told U.S. officials at the event that South Korea has worked tirelessly to find the remains of missing American soldiers and vowed to safely return them home. He added that he will strengthen and develop the long-enduring alliance between South Korea and the U.S. President Moon also visited the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial to express his will to overcome the COVID-19 crisis through the Korean New Deal policy he proposed last year. President Moon has previously said that President Roosevelt, who achieved unity in the face of a national crisis during the Great Depression, is his role model. Roosevelt is also a role model to President Biden, who's promoting a recovery plan aimed at helping working families and boosting America's public sector. 홍유, Arirang News.
Also on the day before the summit, the U.S. Department of Commerce convened another meeting of business leaders from the semiconductor, automobile, and tech industries to discuss ways to address the global chip shortage. Samsung Electronics took part in that meeting, and Samsung is one of several Korean companies expected to announce new investment in the U.S. Kim Sung-min reports.
U.S. Commerce Department on Thursday local time held a second round of meetings with global companies in a bid to alleviate global chip shortages. At the meetings were executives from car makers, tech giants, and chip makers, including Apple, General Motors, and TSMC. South Korean chip maker Samsung Electronics was the only Korean firm to attend. The meeting served as follow-up to a White House gathering last month where President Biden urged chip producers for more investment. After the meetings, Bloomberg, citing Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, reported that one of the top items on the agenda was to improve transparency in the supply chain by promoting information sharing among semiconductor producers and buyers. Also on the table were long-term measures like funding for chip R&D. Manufacturers are known to have pushed for incentives like grants and tax credits. Automakers had demanded that 25% of the chips produced with federal grant money be set aside for their industry, but the secretary has reportedly made it clear that car makers will get no special treatment. Thursday's meeting comes as South Korean business executives are visiting the U.S. for the presidential summit. They're expected to unveil a massive investment plan in the U.S., the biggest investment coming from Samsung Electronics. Experts say that the investment will not only boost chip supply in the country, but also help Samsung compete better in the global chip market.
The investment in the U.S. could be an opportunity for Samsung if it receives some incentives from the U.S. government. And also, it could compete better with its rivals, such as TSMC, by staying closer to its customer companies.
Samsung Electronics has been projected to announce details of its plan to inject some $17 billion into its foundry business. Austin, Texas, where the tech giant already runs a chip facility, has been one of the top candidates for the investment. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
And yet another sign of South Korea's exports recovering strongly from the pandemic. Speaking of chips, exports in the first 20 days of May were up more than 50% from a year earlier on strong demand for chips, cars, and petroleum products. Kim Jae-hee has this report.
South Korea's exports soared in the first 20 days of May. Preliminary data from the Korea Customs Service on Friday showed outbound shipments for the first 20 days of May reached $31.1 billion. That's an increase of 53.3% compared to the same period of the previous year. Daily average exports also rose by over 59% on year due to fewer working days this year. Exports of semiconductors, Korea's flagship export item, climbed 26%. Shipments of automobiles and petroleum products both more than doubled, seeing almost 150% growth each. Overseas sales of wireless communication devices were up 64%, and auto parts skyrocketed more than 220%.
As the global economy recovers from the pandemic, South Korea's exports soared, mainly in items that are of high demand in advanced economies, such as automobiles. Higher crude oil prices also raised the total export value of petrochemical products. This trend in exports is expected to continue for some time.
By country, shipments to China, South Korea's largest export destination, were up more than 25%. Sales to the U.S. and the EU rose by around 87% and 78% respectively. Exports to Vietnam and Japan also increased, but shipments to the Middle East shrank by 14%. Imports climbed more than 36% on year to almost $31.5 billion in the first 20 days of May, resulting in an overall trade deficit of about $348 million over the period. So far this year, South Korea's exports have increased over 22% and imports nearly 20% compared to the same period last year. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, good afternoon. Thank you for making time today.
Good afternoon.
Well, let's start with cryptocurrencies. The U.S. Treasury Department is taking steps to stop crypto from being used for money laundering and tax evasion. The Treasury wants the exchanges to report any transaction worth more than $10,000 to the IRS. The price of Bitcoin, of course, is down about 25% over the past week, but since the Treasury said this, the price is holding fairly steady. Tell us more about that, if you could.
Right. As the President Biden's vision for an empowered, expanded IRS is posing some kind of big impact on the cryptocurrency trading. According to the report from the U.S. Treasury Department, the administration wants to put a new requirements in place that would make it easier for the government to see how money is moving around, including digital currencies. The report noted that cryptocurrencies pose a significant threat or detection problem and are used regularly by top earners who wish to evade taxes. U.S. government obviously are very keen about the tax evasions, so they want to make sure that cryptocurrency is not used for evading taxes. And now it is expected to report any kind of cryptocurrency transaction above $10,000 under the new reporting requirements. Clearly, this is one way of putting regulatory environment for the cryptocurrencies. However, though, this does not make cryptocurrency non-tradable, and they're allowing that as an asset class to be traded. It's just that they will be required to pay taxes if things gets too heated up. Now, if you look at the M1 growth rate of U.S., we are looking at around 20% growth rate this year after the changes in the classification of the M1. But in any case, this kind of strong growth rate in M1 results into the value of currency declining. So therefore, demand for the alternative asset, including gold and cryptocurrency, rises. And clearly, the cryptocurrency has become one of the major alternative assets or alternative currency for investors to look into. However, this will not substitute the actual currency of dollars. Therefore, we don't think that it's going to be rising at the speed of what we've seen in the past 1 year. Most likely, the size of rise for this market would be very much related to the size of M1 growth rate. So this year, you're looking at about 10 to 20% growth rate. And so overall gold plus cryptocurrency market size will rise and accordingly. As long as the loose monetary policy continues, we think that the cryptocurrency market would not fall to the no size. I think that it will probably at least remain at where it is.
Well, anyone who filed a U.S. tax return last year will have seen the first page of that return asking whether you owned any cryptocurrency in the past year. So if that indicates what a priority this is for the IRS. But if we look at the markets now, the stocks in New York were up on Thursday by, let's see, breaking a 3-day losing streak. The S&P up by over 1%, the NASDAQ almost 1.8%. What's the story in the global markets?
Right. U.S. market did quite well yesterday. Dow rose by 0.55%, and S&P was up about 1%. and actually NASDAQ was the strongest, rising by 1.77%. Main reason for such strong market recovery is because we are seeing commodity price kind of easing out. If you were continue to see commodity price rising to the record high level, that means negative news for the operating profit margin for the manufacturing sector. That would result into some kind of bubble bursting in terms of equity market in the future. But with the commodity price stabilizing and continue to see major manufacturing companies showing strong earnings growth rate, including the sales growth rate, if that's the case, then we are clearly in a phase where economic recession turning into economic recovery phase. If that continues, then the equity market has more ample room to further rise. So now we are seeing that company with the strongest earnings and earnings growth rate are showing the strongest rise yesterday, and that is the NASDAQ, and followed by the S&P. We think that U.S. market has more room to go up further on the basis that the economic growth rate will recover, and very fairly stable economic growth rate will be expected over the next several years, and also inflationary numbers should be quite reasonable over the next several years.
Well, here in Korea, the market started out quite a bit higher today, seeming to take their cue from Wall Street. But a little before midday, they went straight down into negative territory, and that's where the session ended. Tell us about that. What happened there?
Right. As you said, the Kospi lost somewhat of steam by about 0.2% or so. And also Kosdaq was down as well. If you look at the overall export numbers, it's very strong. Fundamental numbers looks very good. U.S. market did recover very nicely. All this is positive news, but I guess because of the uncertainty related to what's happening to Asian COVID-19 cases, and also possibility of interest rate hike in case that U.S. does tapering, most likely the Korean government might be more aggressive in terms of the interest rate hike, given that we are not base currencies. So I think the continuation of uncertainty regarding the liquidity condition and interest rate is making market to be a bit jittery. However, we are saying that Korean market is very cyclical, and that we are seeing a very strong cyclical recovery in a lot of industries that we're looking at, including semiconductor and auto market. If we are continue to see very strong two-digit growth rate of export and two-digit growth rate of earnings into the future, we think that today's short-term correction is not going to last for long. And Korea is the most attractive in terms of valuation, in terms of PR and PBR.
And before we go, Mr. Yu, let's look at this new data on Korea's exports. In the first 20 days of this month, they were up more than 50% from the same time a year ago. They've been up every month since November, led again by semiconductors, cars, and petroleum products. What do you see in this export data?
Right. I think if we're looking at this export data, I don't understand why the Korean market is taking that kind of corrections, except the liquidity condition. As you said, export numbers up 53.3% year on year in the first 20 days of May. Of course, I guess the last year May was kind of poor because of the COVID-19 impact. It's a low base effect, but nevertheless, it's such a strong growth rate. Actual shipment amount is much higher than what we've seen pre the COVID-19 era. Country's outbound shipments stood at 31.1 billion in May 1st to May 20, compared to 20 billion a year ago. And over the same period, import also moved up 36% to reach 31.4 billion. I guess the major industry that are showing the strongest growth rate are obviously the automobile industries, and also we're looking at semiconductor industries, and I guess anything related to the China export also looks quite good. All in all, global economy is recovering, and it is coming out of the recessionary era. Now we're looking at a quite strong growth rate, And obviously, Korea is going to benefit out of that, given the fact that Korea's export is more than 50% of total GDP, and Korea is very strong in terms of the fourth industrial revolution-related industries, including semiconductors and electric cars, batteries, etc. So we think that if you're just looking at the export numbers, Korean equity market should do well into the future.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
South Korea continues to report new cases of COVID-19 on a daily basis at about the level they've been for months. And so the authorities have decided to extend the current social distancing measures for 3 more weeks until June 13th. The country reported 561 new cases on Friday, of which 542 were local. Distancing measures in the greater Seoul area and the city of Busan will remain at level 2, which means customers can dine in at restaurants and cafes only until 10 p.m. The rest of the country will stay at level 1.5, and the nationwide ban on gatherings of 5 or more people will remain too. As for nursing homes, they'll be allowing in-person visits starting in June, but only when the patient or the visitor is fully vaccinated. South Korea has confirmed its first so-called breakthrough infection, a man in his 20s who was infected with the virus even after getting his 2 required vaccine shots. The authorities are emphasizing that this outcome is rare. Also on the vaccination campaign, the health authorities have given emergency approval to the vaccine from Moderna, and they've also started a review to possibly lower the age limit for the Pfizer vaccine to 12. Our Kim Dami has more.
A South Korean man in his 20s has tested positive for COVID-19 even after getting the both first and second doses of the Pfizer vaccine. In Korea, this is the first case of its kind. The COVID-19 Vaccination Management Task Force said Friday that the man is believed to have been infected at a family gathering for Parents' Day earlier this month after getting the shots in March and April. He works in the medical field in the southern part of the country, and he is reportedly showing no particular symptoms. The health authorities are pointing out that while it's rare to be infected after full vaccination, it is possible, so they have once again underlined the importance of taking the recommended precautions. Also on Friday, South Korea gave emergency approval to the vaccine from Moderna, which will be the 4th vaccine to be used in the country, along with AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson.
The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety has thoroughly verified the efficacy, safety and quality of the vaccine based on international approval standards and structures.
They have also begun a review for possibly lowering the age limit for the Pfizer vaccine from 16 to 12. To do that, according to the Drug Safety Ministry, Pfizer has signed up for a pre-evaluation. The Ministry of Drug Safety did not specify a timeline for approval, but said the ministry plans to do it as swiftly as possible. On top of that, Pfizer has requested that Korea revise its guidelines for the vaccine so that it can be stored at regular clinics at temperatures between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius rather than the extremely cold temperatures required before. And it wants it to be stored for up to 31 days rather than just 5. Both the EU and the US approved those new guidelines earlier this month. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
K-pop superstars BTS have released a new single for the summer, a song called Butter. It launched at 1 p.m. on Friday, Korea time, for digital only. This is the second English-language single following last year's chart topper Dynamite. You can now hear the song on various streaming platforms and see the video on YouTube and elsewhere. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.